Well, it's more or less the same story that you get when you interview philanthropists. There are only so many cars, houses, planes, playthings that you can actually have and consume. And you're left still with a vast fortune, the income from which greatly exceeds any need you might possibly want to have. So therefore, the temptation or the desire is to do something better with the money, to do something that will lead a legacy of the self. This is something we call generativity, a legacy of the self that is actually good for you and good for society as a whole. And of course, at the same time, it increases the status and the power and the influence of those of wealth who give, because what they're doing effectively is to extend the reach of their influence away from simply the business sector into social and political affairs. So it increases their influence, it increases their status, and it increases their sense of being worthwhile and having a purpose to play in life, which is beyond narrow piling up of mountains and mountains of money.
So in fact, it is also very beneficial to them, right, to partake in this philanthropy. Besides having a purpose in life, in addition to spending money, it actually also helps them to continue to increase their status.
It does. It's a two-way street, philanthropy. It's not a one-way street. It's not simply giving and not receiving something back. In fact, the rewards and satisfactions of philanthropy are very, very considerable. So the satisfactions are being experiencing doing good and seeing your spending doing good. The rewards themselves are rewards of status and increased power and authority in society. So it increases that side of your life.
And you also talk specifically about legitimacy in the context of elite philanthropy. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, the concept of legitimacy is really about acceptance. Legitimacy, some act or purpose is legitimate when society as a whole accept that this is a fair and reasonable thing or a fair and reasonable arrangement. So it's about social acceptance. Now, in this case, legitimacy means acceptance that differentials in wealth and income, profound differentials, are acceptable. People will buy into these differentials, providing that the rich are seen to be giving back and doing good. So legitimacy comes from acceptance that the wealthy are not all bad, that they themselves see that we are all in it together and that we are doing something with these fortunes to actually make a difference for society as a whole and not just for ourselves. And it's in that sense that we understand legitimacy, and philanthropy certainly has that effect. So it's one of its powerful effects. It's to buy into the status quo in terms of inequality, if you like.
Okay, so I mean, it kind of justifies the status quo and justifies the fact that they are this rich in the eyes of the population.
Yeah, those who are giving, the philanthropists, we believe are extremely sincere in what they're doing. We've met and interviewed many, many philanthropists. There is no doubt about their sincerity, their desire to do good, and in fact that they do good, that they are having an impact. We're not questioning those things. But for all those who don't give, the free riders of the wealthy, the free riders, the ones who are not giving back anything very much, they really are bought into the legitimacy game alongside those who are actually leading the way and giving at scale.
And did you ever have any interviews or conversations with elites who don't partake in elite philanthropy that much? I mean, I'm sure they do a little bit, but they don't partake in it that much. And have they told you why, perhaps?
These interviews are extremely difficult to get. Any elite interviews with people who give or don't give are extremely hard to come across. So I would say that's a weak side of our research, actually. We don't really know what those who simply accumulate fortunes, defend fortunes do. We know how they do it, right? So there is enough research out there to know that. So you probably gather from the paper what actually happens is the wealthy have things called family offices. So the family is the unit here that's important. And the fortunes of the family are managed and defended by family offices. And these family offices have got very clever people running them, managers, money managers, and so on. And they can buy in expertise in finance, and they can buy in expertise in the law. And this allows them to actually defend these very large fortunes by pushing the money around and keeping it safe from those who would actually take it away from them. For instance, the taxman or others who are really, not on their side, as it were. So there's a lot of effort goes into defending large fortunes. And that is very important. Philanthropy is part of what family offices do for those who choose to give. And that would be managed through a family office typically as well.
And maybe I should have asked this earlier on, but can you just define quickly what you mean by elite philanthropy? Because you point out in your paper there are a lot of non-elites who also engage in, call it donations perhaps, and not philanthropy,
Yeah.
and which adds up to quite a large sum itself. But can you just distinguish between them?
Yeah, there's mass philanthropy. That's the kind of giving that you or I might do. And we are giving at a relatively modest scale because our means are relatively modest. And elite philanthropists typically can make regular gifts in excess of $1 million. And some of these gifts, of course, extend to billions of dollars. And they're very substantial amounts of money indeed. So it's talking about wealthy people who give at scale and regularly make donations of $1 million plus.
Okay, so I'm just going to read a little extract from your paper, which shows really what I was saying about how it's written. So you wrote that elite philanthropy can function as a form of soft power. And then you also wrote that philanthropy is part of a wider game of neoliberal ideological control supported by an army of legal and financial advisors, so all the professionals you just mentioned that the family hires, who protect the privileges of wealthy people. So can you expand on this statement again, please?
Well, I've expanded a little bit already, haven't I, on how
Yes.
the wealthy actually operate. So they've got the best legal advice, they've got the best financial advice, they've got the best tax advice, and all of that is a feature of actually defending the fortunes that they hold. What they do is they typically then, the philanthropists themselves, would make a very substantial transfer of wealth at a particular point of time into a foundation. Okay, that's a very regular thing. So the accompaniment to great wealth is having a foundation from which you control and which you then support causes that you're keen to promote in the social world. Soft power simply means, well, what you have is if you have a lot of resource and you are deploying that resource to good, then effectively people will buy into you and will buy into your projects. And they will, of course, buy into your nation. So if the United States has a lot of very powerful billionaires who are giving around the world, that, of course, gives them and confers upon them a kind of power and authority in other places in which they can help shape policy and practice in those countries. So that's the way soft power works.
And so you mentioned, oh, sorry, please.
No, you've gone.
So I was going to say, you mentioned earlier on in the interview that the biggest benefactors are universities in developed countries. I mean, in the case that you studied UK and the US, is there anything you can add about that?
Well, universities are geared up to receiving large gifts, and they know what to do with them. They can build a new institute, a new building, and form a new research program. So a lot of big philanthropy is spent on universities and in particular on research and developing research institutes and endowing research institutes. So what they do is they support these causes because they promise big gains. So if you find solutions to coronavirus, for example, that is a major win for the world and for philanthropy. So universities and top scientific talent in particular are things that are seen worth investing in. So it's particularly around medical science and big science in terms of finding solutions to the world's ills, solutions, for example, of power generation, environment, and so on. So universities are geared up to this, and the best universities, what they do, the most authoritative universities, is they are able to buy in top scientific talent because of philanthropy. It helps them and gives them a competitive advantage.